Hello all. I'm going to take this opportunity to give you my advice on your resumes. Because of COVID-19 and doing things online, I can't do what I would typically do in a class. Typically, I would actually sit down with the class and go over my version of what I think a supply chain ISM resume should look like. And then we'd break off into groups. I'd go around, give you my thoughts. We'd help each other. I would help you. You would enlighten me. We would get to know each other, but that's not an option right now. So in the near future, we will get together face to face. I'll sit down with you and we'll go over your resume because I want to be a part of this because I think this is a huge part of you landing an internship or a full-time position. So I've handed you a sample resume of what I think an ISM or supply chain resume should look like, and that's what I'm going to work from. So it's in your syllabus. I've emailed it to you at the beginning of class. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just shoot me an email and I'll send you an attachment of this resume that I've come up with. If any of you out there are watching and you aren't one of my students, just feel free to contact me and I'll send you what I've put together that I'll be working from right now. And even if you don't have it in front of you, I think the advice will be worthwhile. So I'm just going to start from the top and work my way towards the bottom as I look at my version of, hey, if I was a supply chain student, what would my resume look like? First, I think a resume should be one page. I've heard from managers that regardless of your circumstances, for example, you might be a non-traditional student, you might be 40 years old, you might have previous full-time work experience, you might have a military background. I just hear from managers that they hate two-page resumes or resumes that are more than one page for a multitude of reasons. It's just too much information for them, usually too much detail. They tend to lose the second page. If it's stapled, if they print it off, it just gets misplaced. It's hard to keep track of, especially since most resumes are one page. I think we all have a version of our resume that is one page. You don't have to give up too much information. I never encourage that you get rid of anything completely, but you don't have to have the details on there. That's the purpose of the interview, is to elaborate on the information that's on your resume. So again, I like one page, but it's your resume, no judgment. You do what you think is in your best interest. I've actually heard professors tell students, no, make it 2 pages to differentiate yourself from everyone else by having that extra detail, especially if you can justify it. Again, I'm just telling you what I hear, and most HR types and anyone that's interviewing, they just don't like it to be more than one page. Okay, top of the page, obviously, your name, addresses, mailing address, permanent address. I don't know, that's kind of becoming old school. Keep in mind, I am old school. I still listen to AC/DC and Bon Jovi, and I think muscle cars are cool. My first car was a Trans Am, and some of you don't even know what that is because Pontiac doesn't exist anymore. But kind of old school still, and I think it adds some value, but you have to decide. Maybe it's just a matter of your name, your email address, and cell phone number, and an address isn't necessary. And maybe it's not relevant information. I don't know. But what I would do is, for sure, provide your email address and use a university account. Most companies will not get an email from you or send one that's like Hotmail, Yahoo, Gmail, that sort of thing. They might think it's spam. It might go to the junk folder, or just for protection purposes. So if you're a Western student, I would use your wmich.edu account. Use your school-issued email account. It has protections, and in general, if you send something to someone, it's probably not going to end up in the junk folder like something else might. So keep it professional. All of you should have LinkedIn accounts, and you should be building your brand and building it up, and I should be able to go to your LinkedIn account and say, yep, that's John Smith, and I kind of see what his brand is and what the potential of his brand is. So I would actually provide your LinkedIn account on there so they can go directly to it, connect with you, and take a look at it. Remember, it's not social media, it's professional media, and that's where you're building your professional image and brand up, is on LinkedIn. Okay, having said that, you are graduating from one of the best supply chain programs on the planet. Sell it. Don't be shy about that. If you're sending your resume to someone or giving it to someone that's not a traditional recruiter of the program, maybe you need to tell them, hey, this is a top 10 program. We've had a few people tell us it's top 10, top 2. We're ranked. We're recognized. Perhaps provide a website, a link that explains the national recognition. So that could just be basically a link that goes to an article, and maybe there's someone at General Electric or IBM that doesn't formally recruit from the program, and they didn't know that this was a top 10, top 11, top 2 program, And maybe it helps your chances of getting an interview if they think you're higher ranked than most Big Ten, SEC, and Pac-12 schools, which it is at the undergraduate level. Okay, the next part of your resume, the career objective. I've had people tell me this is old school. People don't have career objectives anymore. But at the same time, I like the idea of you telling an employer in a general, generic way what you're looking for. For example, if you go to a career fair, that manager probably has internships and full-time jobs, and he's getting 50 to 100, or she, 100 resumes. So maybe you need to say something like, to obtain an internship with a progressive supply chain organization. Internship. So you're looking for an internship, not a full-time job. You could say, well, they're going to see my graduation date and figure it out. If you make them try to figure something out, they're probably going to pitch the resume because they don't have time to try to figure things out. Maybe your career objective says to obtain an entry-level managerial position, or to obtain a full-time entry-level managerial position. Entry-level, I want to get my foot in the door. Managerial, I want a job that requires a college degree. Full-time, this isn't an internship. So I think sometimes in your career objective, you need to let them know what kind of job are you looking for, internship or full-time, so they don't have to play a guessing game with a pile of resumes. The other problem I see with a career objective for a lot of students is they get very specific or too generic. For example, too specific. Do you have to work in logistics, or would you consider job opportunities in operations and/or purchasing? Would you consider a job in product planning at Ford, which isn't in supply chain management, but you're coordinating engineering activities, and they would like someone with a business degree that's taken engineering classes? My point is, don't be too generic, but don't be too specific either. Don't lock in on operations or just purchasing or just logistics. Maybe you say all three, purchasing, operations, and/or logistics, or just say supply chain management. I think if you just say supply chain management, you've got your basis covered, you're majoring in it, you'd like a job in it, that makes sense. But you're not saying, hey, it has to be on the operations side, because what if they got a great job on the purchasing side? Okay? Education section. Before I move on to the education section, in this class with me, you're going to do a SWOT analysis of yourself later on in the semester, where you basically say, for myself, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are some of the opportunities at my disposal professionally? And likewise, what are some of the threats to my career path? So in marketing, people will do a SWOT analysis of a country they go into. Like, if we go into this country and we try to sell this service or this product, what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? So why can't you do that, for example, for yourself? In other words, identify what your brand looks like. Most students, first of all, have no idea what their brand is, what it looks like, let alone actually be able to sell it. So I had my students do this one semester, and one student spent so much time putting together a SWOT on himself. And he put it at the top of his resume with some fancy infographics that didn't take up too much space. There were like 4 quadrants, and he basically said, if you hire me, this is my brand. This is what I'm great at. This is the stuff that I need to work at. I'm aware of that, but because I'm aware of it, chances are these are going to become future strengths for me. And I'm so professionally savvy, I know what opportunities are at my disposal. I'm going into this hot field. I know what my threats are. I'm not that experienced. So by having that awareness and communicating that to an employer along with what you have to offer, you've implied a level of maturity that they typically don't expect of a college student or graduate. So perhaps replacing a career objective with something really cool that is very useful to a potential employer, and something that came to mind was a SWOT analysis of yourself. And that's just one example. I think on the top part there, you want to basically identify what is your brand and sell yourself. Okay, so that's the front top part of your resume. The education section, obviously your school, maybe the city, so they don't confuse you with another school. For example, you're at Western Michigan University, in Kalamazoo, Michigan. You're not Eastern in Ypsilanti, and you're not Central in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. Likewise, you're at the Hayward College of Business. Okay, we're accredited. We have a rubber stamp that says you get a quality education. If Apple types in Hayward College of Business, it will pop back and say, yep, they're accredited, they get a quality education, they're certified, and most business colleges globally in America are not accredited and certified that validates that you receive a quality education. But the Hayward College of Business is one of probably Don't quote me on this, but I'll bet less than 5 or 10% of all business colleges on the planet are accredited. Okay? All right. You're getting a bachelor's of business administration degree, a BBA in integrated supply management. Here's the problem. Integrated supply management is a great name. It makes a lot of sense, but most schools don't call it that. So maybe in parentheses, after ISM, you say purchasing, operations, and logistics to clarify, well, what is integrated supply management? You're majoring in 3 distinct yet interrelated functional areas, those being purchasing, operations, and logistics. You're qualified for jobs in any one of those functional areas or jobs that try to bring those 3 functional areas together, as a lot of supply chain management jobs are. Now, you could not call it ISM. You could just put supply chain management on your degree because that's what everyone else calls it. Just keep in mind, I don't like the name supply chain management because it's not a chain. It kind of never has been, or it hasn't been for decades. So I don't know why students graduate from, say, Michigan State or Arizona State with a degree in supply chain management, because it's not a chain. If you have an OEM at the top of the food chain, like GM, Ford, Chrysler, IBM, Honda, Boeing, companies like that, they outsource to suppliers who outsource to suppliers who outsource to suppliers. So at the top of the food chain is the OEM. Their suppliers are first-tier suppliers. Their suppliers are second-tier suppliers. The suppliers to the second-tier suppliers are third-tier suppliers. So you have the OEM at the top of the food chain. They typically sell things to the end consumer like you and me. Then you have the first-tier supplier, second-tier supplier, third-tier supplier, and fourth-tier supplier. Okay, that's a chain. Majoring in that and managing that is supply chain management. But here's the thing. Your first-tier supplier could also be a customer. Your first-tier supplier could be a supplier to your third-tier supplier. Your third-tier supplier could be one of your customers and also a supplier to your first-tier supplier. Okay, very confusing. My point is, it's not a freaking chain. It's a matrix or a network or a web of companies. So you have a bunch of companies within and across industries all doing business with each other. That's why we don't call it supply chain management, because it's not a chain. We used to call it integrated supply matrix management. You got a bunch of companies that do business with each other directly and or indirectly. But then we thought, okay, integrated supply matrix management, way too complicated, too many words. The integrated supply management, the integrated part, just means that you're majoring in purchasing, operations, and logistics management, and we're teaching you how to integrate those functional areas so you can help your company do things better, faster, and cheaper. So the integrated is integrating those functional areas, purchasing, operations, and logistics. We got rid of the chain because it's not a chain, so we call it integrated supply management. It truly reflects what's happening in industry, but no one calls it that. They usually call it supply chain management, or they hone in on one part of supply chain management. They say operations management. Our students are mostly majoring in operations management or purchasing management, or our students are logistics majors. No, you're majoring in all 3 areas, and you're doing it in a way that reflects what industry does to do things better, faster, and cheaper. Okay? Enough. Education section. Maybe you need to explain and define and actually give examples of what you're majoring in, especially for those small to medium-sized companies that might not know the breadth and depth of your coursework and skill set. So maybe you actually list examples of what you're majoring in by the content of your coursework. Okay? All right, minor. I would highly encourage that you seriously consider the business analytics minor. People ask me all the time, if I had to double major, if I had to pick up a minor, what should it be in? And I always tell students, pick up a major or a minor that complements what you're majoring in or complements what job offer you want to get. Most of you are majoring in supply chain management or ISM, and you want to work for someone that pays a premium for you because you majored in ISM and they have an ISM job for you. That makes sense, right? You want an ISM job. You're majoring in ISM. Major and minor in something else that complements your major in a way that lets you do your major better, faster, and cheaper. Slam dunk business analytics. We've got companies out there that won't even interview students if they're not minoring in business analytics. Bare minimum, I would take the CIS 2640 class, the big data class, because bare minimum, that'll give you the skill sets necessary to be successful at your job if you go into a supply chain job. So I love the business analytics minor. Here's the problem on your resume. Some people out there might not understand like what that is. So I think in parentheses, again, clarify it for them. Use the real estate on your resume without making it too cluttered. So I tell students, yeah, put down business analytics, but maybe explain that means big data and analytics, database management, data mining, project management, etc. If you know how to use things like Tableau and Power BI, and you can do things like data mining, why wouldn't you put that on your resume? They will assume they don't even know what Tableau or Power BI is, and you guys have coursework in this, so sell it. All right. Obviously, expected date of graduation, I think, is important information. Your overall GPA. The cutoff for Fortune 500 types is a 3.0 typically. So I would say if you have under a 3.0, maybe don't waste the time of the Fortune 500 types if they're advertising that cutoff. But if you have a positive trend line and you're heading in a direction where upon graduation you will have above a 3.0, maybe you put it on there. I would say, in general, if you have above a 3.0 GPA, put your GPA on there, and maybe there's no need for a major GPA. Your ISM major GPA would be based off of the coursework that are ISM required classes. I would never put a major GPA on there unless you're about halfway through the curriculum, and that would be like 4 to 6 classes into the curriculum. Otherwise, it's not a legitimate major GPA. I tell students if you have like a 3.2 or above overall GPA and you have a 3.4 major GPA, is that really useful information? You kind of have to use your best judgment on this one. I also tell students if you're well below a 2.7 GPA, maybe just don't put GPA on there and have them ask why that GPA is not on your resume.